But you added something else to him, and I think Blacare said this and somewhere, that you gave him more of an element of more steel and more even cruelty than Smiley did, than Alex Guinness did.
Yeah, there's an iron to George. There's a bit of a sadist there, I think.
Sadist that Alex Guinness did, yeah.
He's complex because it's like the Afterburners, you know. He knows when to shift. There's this sort of well, when I met Le Carre, and I did like magpies, like we are actors. I was looking for a voice for him, and I found it in John.
You found the voice in John.
I found the voice and things, but he sort of sits as I do in the film. He sits sort of slightly back. Yeah. It's slightly off the right angle.
Yeah.
And people open up, and that's one of the that's a great skill. That's the great skill of Smiley. He can get people to talk, and when he needs to, that side of him that's a little crueler, he does what I used to call the tickle. He just tickles people. It's like if you're with someone who's passive aggressive. They put you on the back foot. They discombobulate you because you can't put your finger on it. You think I've just been insulted, but I'm not sure. And that's the sort of great ability that Smiley has. And then there's equally the masochist, because he stays
in a marriage.
That a psychiatrist in 2012 would have a field day with Smiley if he had him on his couch, and he would say, "Why do you feel that you don't deserve that you get scraps from the table from this woman?"
And what would he say?
Oh, what would he say? Well, as he says in the movie, when he says to Hayden, you know, he's as well as everything, as well as being a sort of wonderful student of espionage.
We're talking about near the end?
Yeah.
Let me just set this up. So here is a man, and this is what's intriguing about this. What makes this such a great story. This is a story of British intelligence and a man knowing that there's a mole, and this is based on a true story, and knowing that there's a mole, and George Smiley sets up to find out who the mole is, and he knows it is because Control is giving him some leads, one of four people in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's part of the riddle. And there is, in part of the intrigue, the fact that there's a man named Carlo who is a Russian who he once had an encounter with briefly and has his cigarette. There's all kinds of interesting things here. And how Carlo may understood him as his true nemesis and took his lighter, and at the same time may very well have known that he was getting something from him because somebody under his own control was having a relationship with his wife. And he therefore has questions of Bill Hayden, the man who was having the relationship with his wife. He has to have an answer.
Yes, it's a wonderful creation, and it's such a beautiful device, because in fact Smiley is really being cuckolded by a man who is thousands of miles away.
Exactly.
And
his ultimate nemesis.
Yes, and who he has great respect for, and who in some way, I think, feels responsible for that he created him, because he was the one that he couldn't turn. He couldn't crack.
When they had the confrontation in India, he could not get him to turn, because at that time, his nemesis Carlo was going back to Russia, assuming, then the Soviet Union, assuming that he'd be shot.
That he'd be shot, and that he wasn't shot. And
he climbed his way back to the top.
And climbed his way back to the top, and always had his eye on that Mr. Smiley.
There is also this, the glasses.
Yeah.
I mean, you look for something. You look for a voice. You got the voice of Le Carré, did you know?
I started with, yes.
And then you moved away from it.
As you do, as you create something, and the more you work on it, the more you own it, and the further it gets away from an impersonation.
Yeah.
But he is the. I thought, what better place to start than with.
And you tried on how many pair? 200?
Something like that.
Looking for, what were you looking for? The kind of glasses he would wear?
Yes, and also I imagined our Smiley as a sort of a wise old owl.
Yeah.
That had these big eyes, and he can see everything, and he hears everything. I mean, the great thing is he doesn't have to rush. He doesn't have to rush to anything. If you imagine Smiley as maybe a spider on a web. You know, he's here, the food arrives, he feels the twitch on the thread, but he thinks, I'll get it later. You know, he's that confident. So I wanted to physicalize that idea. There's a moment at the beginning of the film where where Smiley is actually at home watching television, and the door knocks, and it's Gwilym.
Right.
To obviously
Peter Gwilym, who works for him.
Who is this sort of like he's like his Watson,
right,
in a way, and they're off to take me to the minister, and I'm about to find out that there's a mole, and my head moves. There's a delay, and then my head moves to the door, but my body doesn't move, and it's rather like an owl, sort of seeing everything from his perch, and I was looking. I wasn't absolutely sure what I was looking for, but I did know what I wasn't looking for. So I tried on these glasses and landed on those the ones I wear in the film, and I found them in Pasadena.
That's what I wrote, Pasadena.
Yeah.
This is we have set up perfectly the scene, because I talked about Smiley, I talked about Peter, and we talked about the encounter with the Russian agent, Carlo, was his ultimate nemesis. Here is a clip from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy at that moment. So just in terms of craft, tell me about that scene and you, because that was that wasn't monologue.
It's almost like a play.
Yeah.
It's very audacious of them to put something like that in 40 minutes or something into a movie.
But it's gripping. So, but how did you approach that?
It was. Well, it was an idea that Thomas Alfredson, the director, had. It presented two problems to him. It's a flashback in the book,
right.
And we see the scene, and we are there in Delhi and in the cell.
Right.
He did not want to use another flashback at that point. And also, if you do, you get into that thing of trying to make me look younger. So you use makeup or CG, and it brings you out of the movie. He felt that it would just take you, there's Gary Oldman now looking 20 years or whatever younger. Oh, look what they've done to his hair. You know, he just didn't want anything, a distraction. So he came up with the idea that if Smiley was drunk enough and had a few whiskies, would he open up in a way and almost like a confession, and it was very much a set piece. It was the first thing that I got kind of under my belt. That scene. There's a saying.
And by doing that, you knew you had it.
Yeah, because I didn't then have to think. It's that old thing of know it so well that you can forget about it, and I didn't have to search for it. I wasn't reaching for it. It was in me. There's an old line from Laurence Olivier who said, "It's not how well you know something; it's how long you've known it." It's very true. So that was the first piece that I got down. and I knew it backwards, so I could then focus on what I was saying and not
saying it.
Yeah. And we did the most takes we ever did on this movie. Most of the what you're watching in Tinker Tailor is 2 takes, 3 if you're lucky. And we had to move quickly with it. And but that was a whole day that was set aside for that scene. So I think that's 9 different angles. I think it worked out about.
That's what we call a pivotal scene.
Yeah, and we needed to give it the weight that the weight that it needed, and it's beautiful in many ways because it's a lovely scene. He's really saying, also in an indirect way, he's sort of confessing, realizing, even as he's speaking, that he created this monster. It's his Achilles heel. It's the ghost that haunts him. And he's saying to Peter Gwilym, who has potential, has real potential, cut all ties. Don't be involved. Don't be emotionally involved. Because look what happened to me. I ended up talking about my wife. I couldn't get this guy to talk. So it's beautifully crafted. And there's a line at the end that I was fighting for because there was an original cut that was a little shorter, and they were fearful. You've got an 8-minute monologue, 40 minutes into a spy thriller.
Yes.
Someone's sitting drunk in a chair talking.
Yes.
And they thought it's going to become like Playhouse Theatre or something. And they were trimming it. And there was a line that Thomas cut, and that when I first saw the first cut, I was furious. At the end of the speech, he says that the next day, he handed the pack of cigarettes back to me, untouched. And this was a chain smoker. And he got on his plane to what he thought was certain death. And that chain smoking line was trimmed. And I said, but Thomas, I said, look what it says about the character of Carla.